All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Candid Conversations. Today, I am with one of my new friends, Abby. We met on LinkedIn, and I'll have some information and links in the description notes here. I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for being open to having a candid conversation where others
Thank you
can
so
watch
much.
in. Yeah. Yeah. So the first time we met, we met obviously through LinkedIn and just through messages, and then just realized we had some excellent synergy. And then you and I hopped on a call, and we had to pry ourselves off that call because it was just, I mean, one topic after another, and such interesting perspectives, right? What did you take away from that call that made you want to get on another one with me?
Well, I realized that one, there were many ways that menopause was and was not being spoken about. The
Sure.
thing that I've used a lot that you said to me in there that really was glaring
Okay.
was when you said, if menopause is not explicitly mentioned in your DEI,
Mhm.
then you don't have a complete wellness plan. And
Yes.
it made me think about the fact that typically menopause is not in our conversations. And if we're
Mhm.
not having the conversation and explicitly using the word, then we're not educating completely about female wellness. So that's what
Absolutely.
stood out to me.
Oh, and that just makes my heart pitter patter because that's really what it is. And it's the idea, and I'll often speak to this, I talk about the things we just don't talk about, but that we so desperately need to be talking about. And it doesn't mean that, speaking or having a DEI, a section of your DE&I that addresses menopause specifically, doesn't mean that we have to go sharing whatever our personal business is. Everyone's personal experience is their personal experience to share or not to share, to whatever it may be. And because there are different cultural reasons why people don't share. Many of us are very private, so we don't want to share at work. We want to go to work. But because menopause is a physical, a social, and a psychological and an emotional change, all the alls are changing. We have to be free to show up human. And
Yeah.
that's the thing where you can't control a lot of what happens or what comes up or what manifests during this time. But we need to know that we have a place that supports us as that human being that we are. Yes, we're an employee, or yes, we're a contracted worker, or whatever the case is, but we're still showing up as a human being. And I love that you took that away from our conversation. And if that's the flag that I get to plant in the in this conversation, that thrills me. That really does. So how are you kind of working in the menopause space? Because I know a lot of your work, you've really evolved, like all of us. We evolve in our professional focus. How is menopause affecting you and your work, or you personally?
So, as you know, I'm a female empowerment coach as
Mhm.
well as I'm a clinical mental health counselor in training,
Mhm.
and I'm a certified sex coach.
Mhm.
And so in my world, I am teaching women to be better advocates from the bedroom to the boardroom.
Love it.
Menopause in my world is an umbrella term.
Mhm.
It's an umbrella term that I think that we've used a lot. I think it was yesterday was National
Yeah.
Menopause Awareness Day. And there were so many memes out there about how, a woman is crazy, or
Mhm.
she is all the negative side effects about
Yes.
menopause.
Right.
When the truth is, menopause really is just the anniversary, that one day
Yes.
that marks 1 year since you last saw your period.
Hmm.
Beyond that, the next day is your postmenopause period.
Right.
Before that, it's perimenopause. So there's really 3 stages of
Mhm.
menopause. But for some reason, we've used just menopause as this umbrella term.
Right.
Um, I say that because in my world, it is very important that we understand that postmenopause, perimenopause, and menopause, that entire process has health implications for us. It's about your heart, it's about your bones, it's about so many parts of us that we need to be aware of. And there's this big language lately about us living to 100 years and the importance of planning for a life to 100 years. It means then that this conversation goes beyond just that 12-month marker and goes beyond just the workplace. It means that we need to be better self-advocates for ourselves, and we need to be aware and educated so that we can put together a comprehensive health plan for ourselves as women.
Wow.
So that's where I focus on menopause.
Yes, I love it. Yes, and that's that advocacy. Self-advocacy has to be there. And just like in leadership, we're often share that we have to lead ourselves first before we can lead others. We have to advocate for ourselves before we can truly advocate for others in this realm. When we're in a parental role, we advocate for our children. When we're in a business role, we advocate for our business. But overall, we have to be advocating for ourselves. And much of that comes from awareness and accurate information, right? Vetted information. Dr. Google can be very handy at times, but Dr. Google can, spin you out of control. And it does. We have as a society, and in this society, specifically in the US, we look at menopause as this, like you just fall off this cliff afterwards. Like you become invisible and you are no longer of value. I just wrote about this today where it's almost like seasoned women are expected to just go sit in a corner and zip it. Whereas we women who are in perimenopause and some, when we reach our menopause and go post-menopause into that phase, the whole continuum, we're not checking in with whatever our status is. We just know how we feel. And oftentimes this is the time we feel the best about ourselves because we feel more comfortable in our own skin. We have some perspective like, oh, okay, this too shall pass. I survived that, and I will survive whatever I'm currently mired in. And we, I think, collectively, when we talk amongst ourselves, we feel pretty darn good. Most of the women I know are like, yeah, I finally feel like I know what I want from my life. I finally know what really lights me up and what doesn't work for me. And I'm willing to speak up more. Because almost like before in our lives, we felt that we had to kind of please everybody, that whole thing, or things had to look just right, or this perfect facade or persona. We allowed that part of us to have too much of the microphone. It had too much airtime, right? Yeah. And now like what you're evolving into with your studies and with your focus, I imagine that you feel like you're finally getting into that space too, where it's like, this is what I'm here for now.
Yes. Well, I think we spoke about this when we had our Candid conversation off air the first time. Sure. There is some cultural difference for me with how the older woman is treated. When it's functional, there's some aspects of it over time that has become kind of dysfunctional, but traditionally, I'm from Guyana, South America. And in my family, I can speak for my family. There is a wisdom that's respected with the older women by the younger women. I am blessed that I have a mother, and I always say every room I walk into, I walk in on her shoulders because she has done a really good job at teaching me self-advocacy from very young. But even as an adult, she continues to hold that role of what it's going to be like as I go into that next level. So there's a lot of women who said, we've never had the menopause conversation. She didn't initiate it with me, but when I asked about it, she had a conversation.
Sure.
And she continues to have that conversation. She's somebody that is there that I call her my adultier adult. I go to her when I'm trying, like that. Every time I'll call her, I'll say, I need an adultier adult.
Because I can't possibly be the adult. Yes. I love that.
This is a place where I'm lost. I don't know what to do here.
Sure.
But I'm sure there's facets of even in my culture where people don't have the conversation because they might not know how. But for the most part, the circles I've been in, my immediate culture, my immediate influence, the women, the older women have been respected as being the bearers of herstory and history. And we go to them and they will tell us, I mean, everything from when you first get pregnant, teaching you that aftercare. Because in the United States, the aftercare looked much different to what it looked like when they had us. I remember the day after I had my daughter, the doctor pretty much came and asked me if I wanted to go home. There was no conversation around what was best for me, my health.
Sure.
And many times after that, I've had to make medical decisions. And it was more about, what do you want to do? You know, you mentioned Google.
Yes.
I much would rather that we focus on the research, right? I much would rather that we respect the research. But I have to go to Google when I'm dismissed by my primary care or dismissed by my doctors, as the symptoms when I go to them, as those symptoms being in my head, right?
Sure.
So a lot of us are forced to go to Dr. Google without the knowledge of where on Dr. Google we should go or where on Dr. Google we can trust.
Right.
Because a lot of our medical decisions are thrown back into our laps without adequate information being given to us.
Right.
Here's the truth. Even with menopause, there isn't a lot of research out there about it. And so from a cultural perspective, I'm grateful that I have these women who've gone before me, who I can have the conversation with. I know what my mother's menopause looks like. I know what her mother's menopause looks like. I know what my great aunt, my grandmother's sister's menopause look like. And these are conversations I'm having with the women in my generation. We talk about it. And I have a 12-year-old daughter who is hearing me talk about it as well.
Right.
And so are the younger cousins. So I think it's a cultural thing with the throwing away of the the woman and kind of putting her aside and the silencing. There is more of a leaning into wisdom for at least for women's issues in my culture versus she is put aside for other things and she is dismissed for other things. But when it comes to women's issues, I definitely think there is this embodiment and respecting of the wise woman with her.
I love that. I love that. And we can create that culture and build it around ourselves if we're not blessed enough to have a family lineage that may be speaking that to us. And that's the wonderful thing about, expanding our horizons at this point in our lives, is to meet other people who have a different viewpoint and have different experience and have different models that we can then, make our own. Your model may not be what I've had, but man, I want to tap into that because I love those kinds of conversations and to learn the wisdom and being exposed to wisdom is so different for different cultural backgrounds, of course, but then we have this technology now that is constantly barraging and we have so much exposure to, just people that we don't even know. These are, influencers or whatever we want to call them, or advertising or whatever is showing up on our screens everywhere. And whether we're consciously aware of it or not, our subconscious is taking notes, right? So we've got that constant recording. And it's hard for many people to slow down and quiet themselves enough to really hear their soul and their spirit and what resonates with them. Because I know in my world, I'm a holistic doc. I've been in that space for 30 years. I have had so many people want to turn over their advocacy to me. And I'm like, oh, no. Thanks for the trust, I think, but I don't even know if it's trust. I think it's you don't trust yourself enough. So I've always worked on trying to help people be aware and understand what's going on, but also get in touch with that inner sense of self so that they know what feels right for them. Because not everything is going to feel right for every different person. But when it resonates within you, deeply within, oh, you've got some gold and some wisdom there. And I think that's what you really focus on a lot, and you're wonderful at, is helping people tap into that for themselves. Yeah.
Yes.
And giving yourself permission to even search for that, right?
And that's the beautiful thing, giving yourself permission. Society has one thing women have not been taught to do is advocate for ourselves.
Correct.
We
Yes.
do it very well for everybody else in our lives.
Yes.
Very well. We
Mhm.
show up, we'll show up and show out for everybody else in our lives. But when it comes to us, somehow we think that self-advocacy, self-care, self-love, anything that starts with self, we
Mhm.
equate with selfishness.
Yes. Yes. We add
We
an
see
itch
it
on
as
the end.
selfish. And
Right.
if we see it as selfish, then we stay away from it. We shy away from it.
Right.
And so there is this, I call it unbecoming, that we have to do. We
Yes.
have to learn to unbecome the good girl,
Yes.
unbecome the woman that society told us that we were supposed to be, and
Mhm.
really be rooted in our own sense of integrity. We've
Mhm.
got to define that for ourselves, because until you understand your own integrity, until you identify your own sense of self and have a definition for that, and understand your standards and your boundaries and put those things in place, you'll never feel comfortable enough speaking up and having a voice in a space for yourself.
Right.
There's a reason they say put on the mask on yourself first, because
Yes.
if you're passed out,
Right.
I use an analogy where I talk about giving from the, and I got this from a friend, where
Mhm.
she spoke about giving from, she said, I don't give from my
Yes.
teacup. I
Right.
give from the saucer.
The saucer. Yes.
She is in her 60s, and I adapted that. I said, stop, I really took that message because it resonated with me. I was speaking to a potential client the other day, and my brand Woman on Fire is where I do the retreat.
Mhm.
What I loved that she said is, she said, Abby, what I'm hearing you say is that when I show up with my spark and you show up with your spark, and as women, we all show up with our own spark, then I give you permission to shine brighter. And the
Mm.
more light in the room, the brighter the room is. So the more we're willing to spark and the bigger we make that spark, the more impact we can have as women.
Yes.
And so each of our jobs is to make our spark and our light become as ignited as possible, so that when I come into the room and I talk about my issues, I
Mhm.
just gave you one less thing that you had to speak up about,
Sure.
if you're the generation behind me.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I remember I have this when I worked at CNN, my first job out of college was CNN,
Okay.
Turner Broadcast in
Mhm.
New York. And when I had my first son, back then there were no, he was born in 2000.
Okay.
So back then there were no, at least for CNN where I was working, there was no maternal room or mother room, breastfeeding or
Yes.
breast pumping rooms. And definitely not breastfeeding rooms, no breast pumping, breast pumping rooms. And so I would come to work, and he would, I've made the choice to breastfeed,
Mhm.
and it's painful. And I was told, you can take the pump to work and you can pump the milk. Well, there was something that I had to do that on my lunch break. So
Mhm.
it was kind of hard for you to ask me to sit in the bathroom. I didn't care how pretty you put the
Right.
couches that were in there.
Right.
You're asking me to eat in the ladies' room
Yes.
and to pump the milk. And
Yes.
I think the beauty was I wasn't smart enough back then to know that I I wasn't supposed to walk up to my manager and ask him for his office.
Okay.
And I did that.
Mhm.
And so for a long time, I would go to him he would leave at my lunchtime,
Mhm.
and I would use his office, and I would pump, and I would eat, and he had a television. It was really comfortable in there.
Lovely. Yeah.
I would pump, and after a while, I think he was understanding too, because he had his wife had a baby around the same time. So I
Okay.
definitely think he was a little bit more sensitive to the whole issue because of that. It's interesting because then all the men were having kids, and the women who were working with me were not. Everybody got pregnant after me.
Ah, okay.
And so it's and I've always stopped and wondered about that because it was advertising sales.
Mhm.
But after that, a room was put together specifically for breastfeeding. I bet you he didn't want, when the rest of the kids came by, that he had to give that office up.
Sure. Sure. He was thinking, how am I going to
we-
coordinate all this? But yes, but there
And
always
so
has to be someone to lead the charge, right?
yes.
And I think the thing is, we don't want to keep having the same consistent fight, so to speak, or battle, or whatever we want to term anything, whether it be based on how we appear, whether it be based on our religious belief, whether it be based on our gender, or whatever the issue is. It's time for us to be able to show up human and treat each other as humans, and understand that part of that is menopause. Part of that, and not every woman will decide to have children, or will be able to have children, or will be blessed with
True.
children, but every single one of us will experience perimenopause and menopause. So everything looks different, but some women will be thrown into it surgically or medically because of something that happens. People who are transgender, there is a massive shift in your hormonal balance, right? Your symphony. Some of us go, it takes a long time to get there. Others will look back and go, yeah, I haven't had my period in a while. Let me calculate it. And they're like, oh, hey, I'm postmenopausal. Didn't even register on their radar. But then others, like you had mentioned, they have these feelings of something's not right. Maybe I am going a little, they'll say things like crazy, because that's part of what we're conditioned to think. Instead, it's, yeah, stuff's shifting, but it's not a psychological, quote unquote, disorder. It's something shifting in your body that you may not be accommodating all that well, or maybe your nutrition or your stress level, or you're not sleeping well, and then that's going to affect it. But if we don't talk about these things openly with either, friends or our family, or within a constructed community, like I run it, Unraveling Together, that is there because we don't all have that natural space of community. We have to create it and then fuel it and cultivate that change within ourselves to then share with other people, and be that, that leader, I guess, of the conversation, like you did. You didn't set out to do that.
No,
It's just
no.
beautifully
Even
occurred.
I do believe language matters too. Like,
Yeah.
I am a big believer in language matters. And you spoke about, women identifying it and going, oh, I think I'm crazy. Or this morning I heard a good friend of mine in a meeting, in a networking call. She said, oh, I'm perimenopausal, and so I'm so emotional.
Okay.
And I said to her, I said, that's not perimenopause. That's your
Mhm.
body's wisdom. Your
Mhm.
body's wisdom is telling you something, and you need to sit in that. I invite you to sit in that and
Mhm.
figure out what it is that is
Sure.
making you emotional. What's the root cause for the emotion?
Right.
Perimenopause is a existing process that your body is going through. And around that process, you have other things, other wisdom that your body is kicking up. I do believe that perimenopause is that period where our body does put a different type of wisdom forward to prepare us for becoming the wise woman, which is in
Yes.
postmenopause.
Right.
And there's things we need to pay attention to. But if we write it off as just a set of hormones and, oh,
Right.
this is why I'm emotional, then we don't sit in it. We don't recognize it as that wisdom.
Mhm.
And because if I sign it off as crazy, then it's not wise.
Correct.
right? If I
totally
sign it
agree.
off as, oh my gosh, I must be getting dementia or
Yes.
Alzheimer's, or I'm just forgetful, or I'm old.
Mm-hmm.
Words matter, language matter. And when the more words you layer into the description that you give me, the more that means, right? If I walk into the room and I am Abby, I will show up and act one way. But then if you begin to say, okay, she is Abby and she's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now there's a different way because you've now put that new layer on. I'm a woman.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
She is Abby and she's a middle-aged woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now there is a different layer that's on there. She's Abby, a middle-aged mother or a single mother or whatever.
Sure.
Words matter, language matter. And so it is so important to me that we're very careful with the words we choose when
Yeah.
we're describing ourselves or we're talking among ourselves, because
Mhm.
that language matter. If we're going into the workplace and we're using the word like crazy versus wisdom,
Yes. Right.
why will I attach crazy to my ROI?
Yes, right. Well, it's what's been in this space, it's what's modeled for us is it's that thing that we think and we attach that term, and that term is completely inaccurate on every level, no matter
Yeah.
what is going on. But it's our perception, I guess, of what we're going to live into or what we've been modeled or what we've seen. But that's also a cultural thing. And looking at how do we see ourselves? How do we see our own aging? What are our biases towards our evolution as people? And we think that old is this term that is a negative. We give it negative meaning. But then I often say, oh, it sure beats the alternative. I am thankful for the opportunity to age. The only thing that is anti-aging is death. And I'm in no hurry to
Exactly.
get there, right? Like I am in no hurry. So for me, it's and as women, we're sold all this crap, and obviously I've let my hair be my natural hair. I didn't let my hair go gray. My hair is gray and I stopped coloring it. So for all these years I was coloring it. And I have always loved the look of gray hair. I love when I see a woman with long gray hair and I just think, wow, how beautiful, and the shine and with the sun. I embrace it, but I was covering that out of just a cultural norm, so to speak. Men don't have that same pressure, and they don't put that pressure on us. We put it on ourselves based on what we've seen and what we've allowed to just permeate our own psyche and our own vision of ourselves, instead of really, like you say, sit there and examine the emotion or the judgment that we have towards something. I would not look at someone else and say, oh my gosh, you should totally color your hair, or you should wear makeup. I mean, I don't really wear makeup. I personally don't care for it. I don't like the way it feels, my personal choice. But when other women love it and they love to play with it and, do all the different colors, I think it's beautiful. But that's me being comfortable in my own skin, always have been that way. But there's other things of just embracing the ability to choose or not choose, to say no to certain things, even when you can very easily take care of an activity for an organization, let's say a networking group, and they're constantly asking you to do things, and you start to then go, I really am not enjoying this. Being an advocate for yourself and your own joy
Yeah.
and your own,
Yeah.
your own pleasure in life. And I know that's a big aspect of the work you do. Is pleasure is not, we take this as to just mean a sexual transaction. Pleasure is so much more than that. And that's something that many times women will finally come back to, is finding pleasure in their life through internal and external means,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Pleasure is your birthright.
Yes.
Pleasure is the great that I say. Pleasure is not only is it your birthright, but it's the gateway to empowerment. And
Hmm.
when you can think of how pleasure has been shamed, just because all of pleasure has
Absolutely.
been put into having to be something in the body, most times sex,
Right. Right.
right? And so it has become a word that's been taboo when all pleasure is enjoyment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple.
Yes.
Enjoyment.
Right.
So when a woman can lean into her own enjoyment
Mm-hmm.
and embrace her own pleasure,
Yes.
she becomes empowered because she kind of, for the first time, give herself permission to do the one thing that you have to do in order to be in a state of pleasure, which is live in your body. I've got to pay attention to my mind.
Right.
What is making me really buzz? Like for me, it's music. You put on music, and there's certain tones in music that can make me cry and laugh and suspend me at the same time that I'm like, oh,
Oh, I love
and
that
it's
word.
like touch. It's
Yes.
like touch.
Yes.
There's like certain tones in a voice or in certain oh, you put a saxophone on,
Mm-hmm.
and I can just get lost in it.
Love it.
And in that moment, you're playing a saxophone. I promise you, I don't have time to feel into burnout and overwhelm. I don't.
Right. Right.
I would allow myself. Or how many times have we said, "Oh my God, that was such a good cry. That felt so good.
Right.
That felt so healing."
Mm-hmm.
That's pleasure, right? Sometimes, we think of pleasure as just it always has, or you eat something and it makes you stop.
Yes.
You put something in your mouth and it just makes you stop and you go, oh my gosh. And the world freezes in that moment for
Right.
that one sensation.
Yeah.
Or you step outside. Oh my gosh, I love crisp mornings. Like when that wind is just crisp. I have a hammock on my patio.
Okay.
I'll sit on I'll get into that hammock early in the morning because I just love the way the cool, crisp air feels against my skin.
Sure.
And I'll sit there and I'll just go, oh, just imagining that space between my skin, and I can really get all of that is pleasure. Or sometimes you see something and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Whether it's a piece of art, like I've been looking at the big painting behind you, and it's like, whether it's a piece of art or it's plants or something.
Yes.
We set our environment up usually when it's appealing to the eyes. It's so much easier. My bedroom, for example, I walk into my bedroom and I created my own canopy, this bohemian theme room. I walk in there, I'm happy at the end of the day.
Yes.
Because everything is pleasing to the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Are you walking and there's a scent and something goes, oh my gosh, there's some scents that you saw me before I started. I put some oil in my hand and I rub it together because if I'm flustered, sometimes there's some scents when I take them, for some reason, they just bring me down. And for some people, it's lavender. It's never lavender for me, but for some people, it's lavender. For different people, it's different scents, right? And so when if you listen to how I just engaged in my senses, none of it was sexual. All of it was something that was on some level, a connection between my spiritual and my physical self.
Yes.
And in none of those spaces did I have time for overwhelm, burnout, and none of those spaces included somebody else.
Right. Absolutely.
It was all about connecting with me.
Yes.
So when I can't smell, it's about, I have to be present and in that moment, and it all makes the world freeze and me stop. And in that moment, it's just me. It's just me. Now, when I can tune in to that place and I can take that and I can take that further into a meditative state.
Yes.
Now I've given myself permission to listen to, what is it I desire?
Right.
What does happiness look like to me? If money wasn't an issue and time wasn't an issue, what would I be doing? Where would I be? How would I honor myself?
Yes.
And if we can tap into those places, then I've given myself permission in that space that I matter.
Yeah.
And when I matter and I stay in that long enough, and that becomes habit, and that becomes my integrity and a part of who I see myself as, I'm going to fight to keep that. That's when I'm going to become an advocate for myself. because I'm not going to give up my peace when I've learned to value my peace and I've taken time to create my peace. I'm not
Correct.
going to part from that easy.
Right.
You were talking about the old, women getting older. It's so true, right? Men are seen as distinguished as they get older.
Mhm.
I used to say to my aunt, whenever she walks in the room with her husband, I'd say, "Oh, you stay married long enough, and as you age, you become a wise woman and a distinguished gentleman."
Mm. Mhm.
And the two together, how happy and amazing that could be.
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to the fact that language matters, right? It's not this middle-aged woman and the distinguished gentleman. Like
Right.
I don't even use midlife anymore, just because it's been put with crisis, midlife crisis, and I
Yep.
usually say I'm not on a midlife crisis. I'm on a
Mhm.
midlife quest. I'm
Mhm.
getting to discover the
Yes.
next half of my life. That's the quest. That is not a crisis.
Right.
I
Right.
make that a crisis when I say that it's difficult. But if
Right.
I know that there's more wisdom on the other side of that, and I know that there's more, I'm more tuned in as I go further. I'm more tuned in. I'm more empowered.
Yes.
Why would I? That's better for
Oh,
me.
yes.
I get all these lessons of today that I'm going through to
Mhm.
become wiser and more informed and more empowered on the other
Mhm.
end of this. That is a quest. That
I
is
know.
not a crisis.
Right. Right. And then that's where the language like I use with the unraveling, it's examining and looking, okay, here is my life and here is who I am. Here's my set of beliefs. Here's my physical body. Here's my goals and my dreams. And here's my past. How do I take this and actively examine and then unravel it from a point of, I talk about the proactive or reactive.
Mhm.
The proactive unraveling is when we do that self-examination, we tap into what truly matters to us. And then I use the Enneagram in my work, which is in my viewpoint, it's a way of finding out what makes us tick, what makes us a ticking time bomb, but also how we have put ourselves in this box. We talk about how, think outside the box, et cetera. But for us, when we're children, as we evolve, we make these agreements with ourselves that put ourselves in this box, and we either allow it to become our cage, or we pull that top off and realize, okay, it's all self-constructed based on agreements because of issues that we had, whether it be, lack of belonging, or there was abuse, or there were something that happened to us, that the only way we can make sense of it is to make this decision, as a 5-year-old, let's say, and then we continue to live our lives from that place of fear that 5-year-old who didn't have the language, didn't have the experience, did not have the perspective at that time to really understand the decision they made, right? So then we continue to create this box around us, but by looking at the unraveling as an opportunity to renegotiate our life agreement, renegotiate our relationship with our past. We don't have to sit there and fully examine everything, but we need to put it into perspective of, am I taking this with me, or am I going to leave it in the past? And then what kind of life do I want to live, and what do I want to design for my future? Instead of going with that life that we take by default, which is really the life most people live, right? I mean, you and I, we see the real stuff with people because they tell us everything.
Yes,
And you
yes.
realize, wow, this whole life this person is living is completely a default setting. They are not making any active choices. They're essentially making reactive choices, but they're not looking and seeing, what do I really want? Because they've not given themselves permission. And possibly they have never really experienced that pleasure of the simplicity, and we'll hear the term a lot, loss of libido. I mean, that's a whole hour we could probably talk about that
Yes,
word.
yes,
Libido is not just your sexual thing, but in our construct in this society, women have a few purposes in this world, and one of them is for sex. I mean, let's just call it what it is, the purpose in our cultural, construct. So we are objectified as sexual beings, and then we self-objectify, right?
Mm.
Which I think is that pattern that women like you and I work so hard to help women interrupt for themselves, where they realize, oh, I'm creating these judgments on myself. I'm continuing to do this pattern or live into this way of being based on just what I'm doing. No one is saying to me, hey, you should. I'm shitting on myself. Right? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we
You
see
know
that.
what?
Mhm,
Yes, I agree. What I love about unraveling, and
mhm,
as I listened to your podcast and I was kind of looking at your work, what I love about unraveling, it gives women permission to let go of the past story
mm.
and to realize that I'm always writing. What happens next, I get to decide now.
Yes. Oh,
And I feel like that is something that we as women don't have permission a lot of times to do. So that's what I personally loved about the whole concept that you have with the unraveling. It's
mm,
about it gives permission to let go of the shame. It gives permission to let go of the shoulds, right? Of what should have been, what could have been.
right.
And it says that you have so much ahead of you. You
Yeah.
still get to write this story. Your life is still unraveling every day. And how it happens is up to you. So
Mhm.
I love that concept and that whole unraveling journey that a woman gets to go on with you, because it takes away the blockers, because sometimes menopause, we use it, to be honest, we can see that you can use it as a blocker, right? If I have menopause, for
Right.
many women, oh my God, at menopause, sexuality, sex stops, right? And
All
they
of it falls
equate
off.
it with
Right.
sexuality. Well,
Sure.
no, reproduction and reproductive health
And yay,
is tied to that, right?
I look forward to not worrying about that, honestly.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? This,
Right.
and I have next week, Tuesday, I'm actually having a talk with a grouper. I'm talking about the fact that as women, we've got to learn to, and I'm going to use your word, unravel here,
Yes.
unravel sexual reproduction from sexuality and
Yes.
sensuality. It's
Mm,
two completely different things. You get to walk forward with
yes.
sexuality and sensuality. You walk with that for as long as you want,
Right.
right? Reproductive health, sexual reproduction is a
Mhm.
different thing. At
It-
some point, it stops, whether it's because of menopause or some other reason.
Sure.
And so that's what I when I saw that concept and I saw that you were doing that work, I said, wow, this is like the most forward thinking. I don't know if
Oh,
you listen to Dr. Joe Dispenza.
he is amongst my favorite. Yes.
See, and he spoke about the fact that 50% of what we remember is a lie.
Yeah. And
With
that's
your
probably
unraveling journey, you
the
know what I mean?
conservative number.
Yeah.
Right.
And with unraveling, you get to go, okay, you know what? Half of what I remember is probably not even real anyway. All I have now is this, and I get to create that story going
Yeah,
forward. So
absolutely.
I think that is an amazing place for women to be in this. If we adopt this idea of unraveling,
Mhm.
every day is a gift in that space.
It is.
You get to unwrap something new about yourself and discover something new. Now I'm moving forward with curiosity versus judgment.
Yes. Right. Yes, yes, yes. And curiosity is that thing that never is extinguished. Passion can be extinguished because people say, find your passion. What are you passionate about? I'm like, phew. I mean, if I had to label everything I've been passionate about my whole life, that would be a long line, a long list of things, right? But what if I really, what if something has my curiosity and it piques my curiosity? I'm like, oh, hmm. That grips me and hooks me way more than passion. So yes, so when you're curious about, well, what could be next, and then the wildest question of all, I wonder what's possible.
Mhm.
Like in my mind
Yes.
frame and my mindset, anything is possible, literally anything, and it's just What am I going to, how am I going to impact that or limit it by my thinking and by my action? Because we often, I talk about the no, feel, do methodology that I've developed, which is your head, your heart, and your body, your thinking, your emotions, and your intuition, your, just that intuitive sense. When those three things are aligned and they're working together cohesively, anything's possible. But if we get too in our head or too in our emotions or too in our actions without thinking about how people are going to feel, how it impacts others, and et cetera, then we're out of alignment. And, I think much of our focus on sexuality and sex, so not even the sexuality, but on sex, it's because, with our chakra system and the energy centers, we're completely out of balance as a world, right? I mean, our world is so stuck in that sacral and root energy, like it's so disbalanced that if we don't do that for ourselves and we don't get ourselves centered, we can't possibly center or balance anything outside of us, right? So it really has to start with us.
Even using your analogy, your program, what you said, it's the feel.
Yeah, the no, feel,
The
do.
head, heart, and body.
Feel,
That's
do.
how I remember it.
Yes,
For the
exactly.
people who don't understand the chakra system, using your system, which I think is beautiful right there.
Thank you.
The way we view sexuality is stuck in the body. We
Absolutely.
don't think about the emotion. We don't think about the head. We definitely not thinking.
Yeah.
So
Oftentimes, yes.
And
I tell,
all
you have a
about
daughter, so
the
you
body.
know that. Yeah, we teach our daughters, like, because women, when it comes to vaginal kind of sex, that's an internal experience. And so we do have an emotional attachment based on that. We're allowing somebody into our body. That's different than it being an external experience. So even just from physically, that's a big difference.
Yes, I agree. And we, like you said, that balance, I like that. It's so simple. The head,
Very much
the
so.
heart, the body. The head, the feelings, the emotions, the body. That I like that. Where are you sitting? That is so easy for us to do. If we're too heady, most times we're showing up. Great place to show all of that masculine energy sitting there. And then if you're too much in the heart, you're probably too much in that feminine energy. So you're missing out on some of the logic you can get from the head.
Sure.
And if you're too much in the body, then you're just moving and you're going just sensory. So by aligning them all, you're moving together with everything. I like that.
Yeah.
And think of if you're sitting there while you're unraveling, it's curiosity. It really comes back to curiosity versus judgment. And I think that a lot of times what happens is we move a whole lot with judgment. And as we both know from the women we've worked with, the big cloak that women show up with is we tend to be very much in our heads, very much in our heads.
Yes.
And we have to learn to ground ourselves into the heart.
Yes.
And to really, like with my work, get into the body. And with your work too, because you do that work. And so I've been writing a lot lately about the importance of supporting wellness in the workplace.
Yes.
And
That's
in my
where we align
research,
so much. Yes. Yes. Share some of the newest. I love hearing what you're up to.
So what I've been doing is really researching and showing and finding how far back the research has shown the ROI on this and the money companies can save on this. Because, when you walk into the companies, if you're going to get them to get behind it, they want to see that for every $1 they spend, they're going to save $6, right? Or they're going to make $6.
Right.
Really, they're going to make $6. And they want to see the bottom line of how that's. So actually today I'm working on putting one out about, no, today it's on self-advocacy, the importance of self-advocacy. The next article I have gauged up to go out is the business case for
Excellent.
for female wellness programs in the workplace.
Mhm.
And it is interesting, as I've been doing this work and doing this research, it really makes no sense that this is something that you have to push companies to do. It's
Right?
proven that women are better leaders because we come from the three places you spoke about.
Mhm.
We will drop into the heart, we will move in the body, and we're capable of functioning in the head.
Yes.
But we have been forced
Yes.
in the workplace to really sit in the head, and it's not been the best use of us, right? Because when we bring the heart in and we bring the body in, like your program does, there is a magic and a wisdom that happens there that brings a different level of nurture, and
Mm.
teams are proven to be happier in that.
Yes. Yes.
Women advance, you keep really good qualified females in your company and your organization when you do it that way. There's a different type of mentorship and sponsorship and all of that that can happen, and companies benefit.
So much. You are speaking my language. I love that. Yes. And as you and I discussed before, and I'm sure that, many other people realize this, women are collaborative by nature. When you look back at how, the tribal nature, the clan nature, the, neighborhoods, the before we started separating out into the suburbs and, how we are now, you go in through your garage, you never see your neighbors, you don't even practically know them unless you're my neighbors. And it's like, hey, how's it going? And I love to meet people.
What I was just about to say, unless you have my neighbors who will make sure you see them.
Yes, I love that. But that it's our nature to collaborate. The collaborative model of business is alive and well. The true just competitive hasn't worked all that great except for a few. But when you look at communities and you look at neighborhoods and you look at cities, even, no matter the size, we do tend to congregate into a smaller kind of collective because that's what works for the human. We there's a certain way that we're just designed to need to be around others, and we all got a front row seat as to what it means when we are separated and isolated. That isn't good. That is very, very bad for the human condition. Psychologically, even our gut biota changed so much because we weren't interacting with other people's, their microcosm. We've got that on our skin, right? Yeah, we've got that. We've got energy. Energy gets exchanged. That's not woo-woo. That is science, people. It's so fascinating to me. And I haven't shared this with you yet because I just started, but I'm in a pre-accelerator now that I have entered because I want to speak more into this exact topic of not just women's wellness in the workplace, but how women, how we can step into those leadership roles. And when we're supported, we are loyal. I mean, that whole mama bear comes out. We are fiercely loyal human beings as women. We want to stay in a company that we feel included. We want to stay in a company that we feel we are valued. The reason so many women leave the workforce, at least it's a theory, and I'm looking for research, women leave at this stage in life because they don't feel supported. They don't have that place that they can show up and work while human, have little tweaks we need. Women are not going to go all gangbusters and demand, pedicures every day at work when we are getting, some of our needs met. Basically, we just need a couple little things. And to not have to tell, Joe Smith, the 36-year-old manager, that we're having some issues that are, as I say, she's having grown-ass woman issues. She is allowed to have them. We need to just be like, hey, need a TV timeout for a moment and go take care of whatever you need. Not everyone has the ability to separate from whatever, like if they're doing phone calls all day, they may need to, in between calls, to go take care of something. When we're in this perimenopausal phase, we have days that are, nothing's going on, and other days where everything's going on. And that gets radically enhanced on the good when we have support and we feel like we have what we need, and it gets very negatively enhanced or dehanced. I don't even think that's a word, but either way, it becomes a very negative
Can enhance
situation.
negative or positive.
Right, exactly. So if we're super stressed, oh my gosh, the symptoms can, or as people call them, but the issues can go off the charts in the negative direction. But when we're supported, when we support each other, we can produce and be so much more productive than people have ever imagined, right? When
Yeah.
women are feeling like that they are really loved and honored and cherished, and that spills over into all the genders. Every human feels amazing when they feel that they are valued in whatever they perceive as being valued. Yeah.
I wrote an article about this last week, how to, I think it's how to have a, like the how-to guide on having a women's wellness program in the workplace. And
Yes,
a
I
lot
you,
of what
you
you spoke
gave me a
about,
little shout out. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting to me. One of the things that I definitely want to mention here, because I've been speaking to a lot more of them, is that for some reason too, perimenopause is acknowledged 40 or older, which is
Sure.
typically the way it's been.
Right.
I'm meeting a lot of 30-something-year-old perimenopausal women.
Sure.
And so I do want to say, even as it comes into the workplace, it needs to be something that doesn't have an age put
Yes.
on it.
Totally agree.
It needs to be the series of symptoms and the series and where the body is.
Mhm.
I agree with you. When women show up in numbers, we make such a difference. One of the things that the divine feminine, ultimately, she's a life giver.
Yeah.
And this is proven. You give something to women, we give it life, right? The feminine, you give something to the feminine,
Yes.
and the feminine gives it life. This is why when women are on boards, when you have more women on boards, they're much more effective.
Sure.
Men tend to be ideators, right? They'll give ideas and ideas and ideas. Women come in and make something of it, give it form, give it shape, give it life.
Mhm.
And that collaboration,
Yes.
any kind of collaboration that does not have a woman, tends to not have a robust life
Right.
at the center of it. It goes so much more. So it makes sense that if you put a bunch of light together, like we were talking about earlier, it gets bigger and it gets bigger, right?
Yeah.
You bring a group of women together and we support each other. One of the things the pandemic did, I think, is prove what you said. When we're separated, anhedonia becomes an issue, right? That whole pleasure piece gets lost. Human connection, I need your bad germs.
Yeah,
Your
absolutely.
bad germs
To build, to chew on and create your
to
own.
become stronger.
Yes.
I need your energy
Mhm.
because your energy boosts me.
Yeah.
I need your bad days. I need your bad, even when people bring bad energy, bad attitude, I need that because if I take it and I use it and I transform it in the right way, there is a healing even in that for me.
Yes.
I become better when I learn how to react to you, when I learn how to show up for you, when
yeah.
I learn how to support you, when I learned how to set standards and boundaries
Yes.
for myself so that
Right.
I can know how to be with you. I
Mhm.
can't get that in a lonely planet,
Right.
in a lonely state.
Right.
People need people. And I need my sisters to show me how to do womanhood
Mhm.
because I could only experience it in my moment, in my body.
Right.
But you might have done it 2 days ahead of me, or 2 years ahead of me, or
Sure.
4 years ahead of me. I need you to tell me how to do it. Because there's, and this is a whole other conversation about epigenetics.
Yes.
I am
Right.
forever coding generations that are
Mm-hmm.
coming through me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm either doing it if they're coming directly, or I'm doing it through inspiration.
Absolutely.
I am forever coding. We carry culture as women.
Yes.
We carry culture. So we need each other. The best thing that anybody can do is separate women and convince women. The most powerful thing that was done in history, doesn't matter where you go in the world, when
Mm-hmm.
they can figure out how to have women turn against women,
Mm-hmm.
everything else falls apart, because
As we've
what
seen.
happens is you've raveled the culture.
Absolutely.
You've,
Absolutely.
whether it's you having a woman say, you know, you've been identified as a witch, and so you
Mm-hmm.
need to choose 3 other women who are also witches.
Yes.
And then we all start pointing out women and bringing each other down,
Right.
not seeing the bigger picture. However it is done, or even being branded as names, and
Mm-hmm.
taking our name and our sacred practices and the things that
Sure.
are sacred in our body and making them something negative. When
Yeah.
you go through this process, the best way for you to do it is to get a woman to hold a woman down,
Mm-hmm.
right? To get a woman to take it away from a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I think of the Supreme Court,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
and I think of Roe v. Wade.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to go into the politics
Sure.
of it.
Sure.
But what I do notice is that there was a comfort in making the decision to turn that back when there was a woman who was standing with them. I bet you that would have been a much tougher decision, and probably not touched, if there was if we had just all men.
Sure.
Instead of judges,
Sure.
because they would have thought twice. But having a woman among them gave them permission. For a long time, they had Ruth Gator,
Ginsburg. Yep. Oh yeah. She was like, mm-mm.
Ruth
Yeah.
Bader Ginsburg.
Right.
And for a long time, she was sitting there, and she said no.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't touch it. But from the time she was absent and they had permission, the permission of a woman who was willing to stand by them and to stand there with them, then suddenly they can do it. They wouldn't do it without us.
Right.
And so a lot of times we get upset, but if you look and you really study history, women, most times, in order for us to be held back, for our lights to be out, for our lights to be dim, they just need one woman who says it's okay. Because that one woman is so powerful when we put her up against the rest of us. Think of what happens when we stand together.
All right.
We
That's
change
the
the
flip.
world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's the flip side of all of that is when we do stand together and find that common ground. It doesn't have to be every little tick in the box. It can be something that is seemingly inconsequential in and of itself. But when we each, like to use the light analogy and the spark analogy, when we share that light, or even just to use the whole analogy of the candle, it takes a candle light to light another light. That darkness is the absence of the light. Just like in health, disease is the absence of health. So if you just go down the route of trying to fight and put out all these diseases, that's the wrong, in my mind, in my experience, that's the wrong conversation. Fuel the health, build up the health. That is what extinguishes disease. Disease can't exist in a healthy environment. Love is what gets rid of all hatred and all of those negative things. If you can spread that love, and that love of others must come from a love of self. It's much stronger when it comes from a love of self and understanding of self, so that we can share that with other people and humanize them. And I think the more we identify our own, issues through an unraveling or whatever someone wants to call it, the more we realize our own issues, the more we can see that other person and go, they've got their own stuff too. They've got their own battle they're dealing with. They've got their own things from the past. They have their own dreams. They have this great reconciling to do. How about we kind of help each other figure that out? Instead of spinning in our own little world, working together and working on some of these issues together in collaboration, it's an incredible thing. Not only in the workplace, but on every level, community wise. Solving homelessness. I mean, we don't even need to get started on that whole topic because my gosh, how is this still an issue? Hunger? What? How?
Because I usually say poverty and all of that need to exist so that some of the very well-meaning organizations can exist. And I can't have capitalism and nonprofit worlds and all of that if I don't have a problem. So they need to exist so that those things can exist.
Yes.
Dave Ramsey, I don't know if you've ever heard about him. He talks about the gazelle and how, the way the gazelle, or even if you think of the commercial with the, I think it was Red Bull or one of them. I think it was a Red Bull commercial, but the two gazelle are there and the tiger shows up or the lion shows up. And the other gazelle said to the one gazelle turns to the other and said, I don't have to be the fastest. I just have to be faster than you.
Yes. Correct. Yeah, that's my zombie apocalypse plan too. It's like, I don't have to be the fastest, but I gotta be faster than this. But no, yes, no, but that's so true. Yeah.
And I think like that is what a lot of times when it comes to policies and it comes to that to me is the difference between competition and what makes competition different to collaboration. Yeah. Collaboration, I'm figuring out how to hold your hands and bring you with me.
Yeah.
Competition, I just have to be faster than the slowest person.
Right on.
And a lot of and we don't see that there's one less person, because if I was this time around, I was the second to last slowest. After the slowest is gone, it's me.
And they're hungry again. Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. So much wisdom there.
So what I usually say to men when I'm having this conversation with them, I hear men come to me all the time, mostly because of the work I do around sexuality, sensuality, and women. And they will come to me and they'll say, oh my gosh, I really want to know about, and they genuinely want to know how they can be supportive of women.
Right.
And I usually will say to them, if you want to know how to support and how to grow a woman, what you're doing with me is you've learned that the wisdom in it is to get another woman. Because you all will go crazy, and crazy being the appropriate word there, if you try to get into our minds and understand us. Right. Just get a woman, because we're complex. Mm-hmm. We're beautifully complex beings, because we have so many layers and there's so many parts and sides to us, that it takes a woman to really help you to understand a woman. And the way that unravels in the workplace is get more women on your board, because then they can tell you how to retain your amazing women talent that you want to retain. Right. Put more women in leadership, because then you can have women having mentors that are women that can tell the women who are coming after, before, they can have a collective wisdom going of how to do this thing in this female body. Yeah. With all its complexities, whether it's hormonal stuff that's going on or all the other experiences we had, whether it's motherhood or gynecological issues, a woman can tell another woman how to succeed in spite of. Yes. And the company benefits, because then you have women leading women. And you have women not only leading women, but women being able to advise women and to lead the charge of how men can learn to lead women.
Sure, absolutely. And as long as those women, right, as long as those women are showing up as women, and you know what I mean by that, like
So
you're not
that's what
just,
I was gonna say.
yeah,
You
like not
need
just
to
putting them there.
support, you've
Yeah.
got to support female femininity in the workplace,
Hmm.
because you have to have the empowered woman
Hmm.
in the workplace, and you've got to allow the empowered woman to show up, because an empowered woman is sitting in all of her.
Hmm.
A disempowered woman is different. She's coming in as a, I have that whole thing I talk about. She's coming in here as a good girl. She's coming in really broken, or she's coming in as the victim.
Right.
We're not talking about a disempowered woman. If you have an empowered woman who's fully supported, who's able to sit completely in her womanhood,
Hmm.
and to bring her wisdom forward, to sit and enjoy her pleasure and not be judged and not be shamed, but valued instead of put away and dismissed, you would be amazed at how you can transform, because that's a life giver. And the more you multiply that, the better it is. And that problem you're talking about, homelessness, I bet you'll be solved.
I guarantee. I guarantee it. And I think so many men are in that place right now where, I know so many good men. I am so fortunate to have awesome male friends, awesome male colleagues. I mean, some of the best people, and they are at a point of crisis in a way where they're not free to show up as who they truly are. There's this they've got to kind of toe the line of this good old boys network that no one really likes and no one really wants to be part of necessarily. There's this fluidity. It's an odd space, and men don't know, am I too masculine? Am I not masculine enough? That's a whole other can of worms there, right? And I mean, I have men saying to me all the time, thank you for talking about what is going on with my female partner, my female colleagues, because I don't know what to say to them. I want to be supportive. I want to be there for them. But when if I say something, she gets upset with me, or if I don't say something, she gets upset with me, I can't win. And that's a very tough place for men to be. So I want men who are listening, if they've gone this far with us, understand that to be pro-woman, you do not have to be anti-man. To be pro-feminine, you do not have to be anti-masculine. Abby and I we're the fluid, we're all about the flow and the back and the forth, the yin and the yang, whatever the duality is, it's about that continuum, and it's about working together cohesively, collaboratively, growing new things. And growth is a cycle. To have growth, you have to have death and decay. And, like if you look at the soil cycle, everything natural. Same with business. There's a cycle there. Some businesses they've served their purpose, and it's time for them to now be renewed as something different. And that's so much of the energy when you and I talk about and use that word. Energy is meant to be transferred to different projects, different things. It builds when it's added to each other. But when we try to fight each other like a man versus woman, and we make it this, competition, we get nowhere, right?
And that's why I say feminine versus masculine.
Yes, and I
right?
love
Because
that distinction.
That's energy.
And we
That is
both
not
all have
gender.
that. Yes, we
Yeah,
all have that.
that's not gender. For me, it's not a
Mhm.
gender thing. It's an
Mhm.
energy.
Yes.
It's about empowerment to sit good in and solid in your femininity, or empowerment to sit good and solid in your masculinity. But here's the
Mhm.
truth. You need to be sitting in both.
Yes, you do.
You
Absolutely.
need to be sitting in both. So I do agree with you.
Mhm.
In fact, one of the things I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine the other day, and I was saying to her, it's interesting because here's what I find when I go into the workplace. It's the men who are more willing to purchase and pay for the programs to bring in me, to bring
Yeah.
me in,
Okay.
than the women. And the reason for that is the women have the self-advocacy thing going on, and they're afraid to speak up. And they don't know how it will be received if they bring, and they're afraid of being seen as what's become a bad word, feminist, right?
Yes.
And so the men lean in more and they will bring me in because they're coming from a different place. They're coming from a place of, I want to show that I'm supporting my female colleagues. And so the motivation is different. For one, she's not doing it because she's afraid of being judged for making the decision. She doesn't want to be seen as feminist. It's become a bad word. And for him, the motivation is, I want to show that I'm supportive. I want to show that I'm an ally. I want to show that I want to make this better. And there's some women who stand in that space as well, who will go forward. They'll say, look, I'm going to do this, but I'm finding that at least for now, I have the conversations with women and there is a need and it's highlighted, but it's the men that are putting the money behind it. And so that's, you know, I'll just call it out. So and I say that to say that this movement cannot move forward. Whatever movement you're trying to do, nothing moves. There's the stronger or the most privileged or the most equipped doesn't take the first action. Because more than likely, the ones that are marginalized are the ones that are quieted or put to the side. If they don't have the economic power to make the change. And a lot of this takes economics. If you're bringing you into the workplace, it's economics. If you're bringing me into the workplace, it's economics. It starts with good use of economics so that you can create good programs. And because it's economics, there's a ROI that's attached to it, right? So I do think that men, our male counterparts, are very important in this process because we cannot do it alone. But once we're ignited, everybody benefits.
Absolutely. And that's the ultimate goal, right? And I'm thinking after, this part of this conversation, which we'll wrap up at this point so that we can, have another conversation in which I think we should talk about what makes a good, a DE&I program that is not just looks nice on paper, which doesn't just check a box. And I think with our different perspectives and our different experiences, yet our very similar outlook of collaboration, and we come at things a little differently, but the goal is to create this wraparound experience that really moves the needle, and not just using that as a term. I mean, we need to make some progress here. Like, how can we still be having the same issues, the same conversations, the same gender pay gap, the gender pension gap, all this stuff is just like, it's time that this is behind us. And for us to move forward in our evolution as our own person, you and I are those kind of people that get fed by making an impact, not just a difference, but making an impact that is measurable. So let's put our thoughts in that space of next time, talk about that, because I would love, and as we talked about the first time, we want to collaborate on a project, and we'll talk offline about that and find our other people and our allies. But I think that's the part that's missing is so often there's a lot of lip service, like in the corporate wellness space, there's all this about health and health and health. But I mean, just taking people's blood pressure and looking at their cholesterol and going, it's too high, here's a statin. Is that really moving that proverbial needle? No. No.
As a society, I think we're social media proves that our culture has become about trend. It's about trend. Trend has no real action. It's about trend. And unfortunately, I think DEI, ERGs, all of those programs have not worked and have any real impact
Mhm.
because they've been trendy. Looks good for the company to have it. Looks
Absolutely.
awesome for me to say,
Optics.
I'm
Mhm.
working on it. Yes. So
Mhm.
it's trendy right now. It's, let's all figure out how we can do this. So we're trendy and we don't get canceled, because face it,
Yes,
cancel culture has become a big
it's
thing too.
real. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
a it's a real force, but it's a made up force, right? I mean, it's just like out of the ethers, and it's this wild ride of nonsensical things,
Yes.
but very powerful. Very powerful. So yeah, I think that'd be a fun, and I use the word fun in like the sense that we have fun solving complex issues.
Mhm.
I think it's fascinating to me to even come to hit an obstacle and think, I'm gonna have to chew on that for a while, and let me get centered and let me feel how I really feel about it. And then let me think about it and let me look at some research. Let me gather some data so that I have something concrete along with an intuitive sense of right or wrong. And that's that other part of many of us who have done the work. We get more in tune with what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And that the whole corporate social responsibility, great phrase, great idea, but do we really need a whole department based on what just should be done because it's the right thing to do to support the humans in your workspace? So I think that'll be interesting to talk about.
Yeah. I use it. I say, let's stop being trendy and let's get profitable, because
Yeah.
there's real profits that we can have. There's a real finance and a business case that can be made for the things that we're talking about,
Yeah.
and not just for menopause, or in my
Right.
program, motherhood to menopause. Not just for that, not just as a wellness program, but in all areas. You can tie these things together so that it makes business sense. And that's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line to me.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, I love it. Well, this has been so just it just feeds my soul. It's just incredible. And I'm so glad we met. And I thank you for reaching out that very first time to connect with me. And I look very forward to, just what our connection is going to result in. And maybe there'll be people who will be part of our little ecosystem and be spurred to do whatever they're called to do. And that's the beautiful part of people, taking those masks off, just, and just being real with each other and real with themselves. So thank you so much for your time. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm definitely leaving here with a full sense of unraveling. Every time I get stressed now, I'll just go unravel.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to
Okay.
everyone who's watching us and listening right now, and then just stay on with me for a second and we'll say goodbye. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much for everybody looking.